Okay, namaste. Welcome everyone for today's webinar on how to approach Indian darshanas to get the best out of them with Dr. Rajiv Kurapati. We'll get started just now. Thank you everyone for joining. Dr. Sherry Lindemood from Florida, and anyone else, please share with us in the chat where you are joining from, and you can get a quick little shout out. Glad to have you with us today. So in today's webinar, we have Dr. Rajiv Kurapati, and he's written a new book called Indian Philosophies Rediscovered, Ancient Wisdom and Its Modern Relevance. And so in today's session, and Dr. Kurapati, who graduated from HOA's MA in Sanskrit program, is going to offer practical insights on how to meaningfully approach the Indian darshanas, the whole systems of philosophy rooted in disciplined inquiry and experiential understanding. So he's going to get into the importance of understanding the historical context, right? As a graduate of Hindu University of America, you have to take many courses, and even though you focused on Sanskrit, you get a broader historical understanding. And so many of our webinar participants also joined for that broader understanding of the historical context. Dr. Rajiv is going to go through some core characteristics that define the Indian philosophical systems, right? No matter how many times you hear it, maybe this is the first time you're hearing it. The Shad Darshanas laid out is beautiful. They make so much sense. They build on each other, and Dr. Rajivji is going to give his perspective on it and interpretation and his presentation. So that's going to be really exciting for us to see as Hindu University of America, seeing where our graduate students um, have come and what they're sharing out there. And so we're going to kind of also focus on why the study of darshanas remain relevant today. So my voice is fading. Sorry if my audio is not great. Let me not move so much. And yeah, so all of you, whether you're lifelong learners, if you're already HUA students, if you know Dr. Rajivji, if somehow this is the first webinar you got into, we're glad to have you. And Dilip G from Maryland, thank you for joining. Dr. Sherry Lindemood from Florida. Now let me introduce Dr. Rajiv Gorapati. So he has went through the MA Sanskrit program, and it's just amazing to see where Dr. Rajiv, who actually practices and is a medical doctor, right? And he's been a professor at the University of Kentucky. He's, again, got a lot of accolades. He's triple board certified. He's got his whole healthcare aspect of it. But he's also an award-winning author. He's written now 3 books, Unbound Intelligence, or 4 books. This is his 4th book that he's written, Unbound Intelligence, Physician, How Science Transformed the Art of Medicine, and Burnout in Healthcare. And now with this book that he's presenting today, he's really taking another step, and we're glad to have Dr. Rajiv Gurapati with us today. And so with that, let me hand it to you to get us started. I'll be in the background supporting. Dr. Rajiv, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Uncle G, for the wonderful introduction and welcome. Always happy to be back on the HUA platform, either in the form of giving a talk or interacting with the graduates or the professors. It opened up new vistas, new dimensions in my understanding of Indian Shastras, Darshanas, philosophies, what have you. So let me go ahead and see if I can share my PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it comes up. Vanajiji from Atlanta, glad that you are with us. Yeah, we can see it.
Can you see it, Uncle G?
Yes, we can see it, but it is not full
great.
screen yet.
Yeah, that is the full screen.
Maybe it's sharing full screen on one screen and not the other.
I can, let me try that again.
I launched another poll. Let us know how you found out about this webinar.
How about now? Can you see it?
Yeah,
No.
we can see it. Just not in full screen mode. That's okay.
Is it on the full screen mode now?
No, it is not.
Oh, interesting.
Spotlight this shit.
It is for me. Let me try again. Maybe.
Yes, and again, welcome everyone for joining today's webinar. If you joined a little bit late, we have Dr. Rajiv from HUA going over how to approach Indian darshanas to get the best out of them. And yes, now we are in full screen mode. There we go.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So Indian darshanas, as if you're new to this topic, or if you're already studying some of it, or you're a scholar, this topic might actually cater to all the three. But if you're a scholar, then you probably went through the traditional paddhati. But this talk is not traditional paddhati. This is based on uh, how a modern 21st century citizen of any nation can approach these darshanas and how to make sense of them, because they were written hundreds and some of them thousands of years ago. So to understand them, we need to actually approach it in a certain way to get the best out of it. So that is the topic today. So this is based on, most of it is based on my recent book, Indian Philosophies Rediscovered: Ancient Wisdom and Modern Relevance. In this talk, I'm going to touch upon what are the core characteristics of these darshanas. What are the darshanas really? What is a darshana? What is a shastra? We heard about words like shastras, right? Nyaya shastra, niti shastra, natya shastra, ardha shastra, and so on. What are those shastras and what is a darshana? And then it's important to understand the historical context, because most of the Indian civilization has not cared a whole lot about history. In other words, history was not Indian history was not mostly written by Indians. It was written by foreigners, sometimes Chinese a little bit, and a lot by the Europeans. So understanding the historical context is important. And then a little bit about its relevance. And relevance is not a, I'm not going to separate the relevance out of in the three topics here, but relevance comes intrinsically in each of these in this presentation. So before we move on, every great civilization, what is a great civilization? The civilization that continues to exist. Not, for instance, Mayan civilization was a great civilization at one point, but it almost perished now. We only have relics of it. Mediterranean civilization, which is Greek civilization, was also a great civilization. Then we have Persian civilization. So these are all civilizations that were great at one point, but now they're remnants, they're relics of those civilizations. But if you look at Chinese civilization, it still continues. Look at Indian civilization, it is still very vibrant. So every great civilization has two characteristics. One is a drive to innovate. By innovate, it's not just technological innovation, it is innovation in all spheres of human development. So new ideas come from reasoning, using our faculty of reason. So that's important. Second is the will to preserve. You cannot simply invent, you cannot simply discover new ideas and then let them go. You have to preserve them. So in the next couple slides, I'll show you how Indian philosophical systems, or the wisdom of the Indian civilization was preserved over thousands of years, and which is the reason why the great civilization still continues to be vibrant and continues to influence not just the Indians but the rest of the world. So we know preservation happens by organization and specialization. You have to specialize and you have to organize that knowledge. This is one example of preservation of knowledge. We all know that Vedas, right? Vedas is a corpus of knowledge, huge, and they were divided, specialized, divided into four buckets, or Rigveda, Yajurveda, Atharvana Veda, and Samaveda. I'm not going to go over what are these, what's in it, and everything, but the goal is to show you how knowledge is preserved. Groups of people throughout the Indian subcontinent organized into smaller sections called shakas. The word shaka, Sanskrit shaka, word means branch, right? The branch. So they have categorized into numerous shakas, and each shaka preserves a particular aspect of the Veda. So in Rigveda, traditionally, there were 21 shakas. How do we know? Where do we get these numbers from? Patanjali, writing in his Mahabhashya, the dates are very speculative. Some say it was 2500 years ago, some say it was the 1st and 2nd century CE, or 2500 years ago. We don't, it's very speculative, but it was a long time ago, a few thousand of years ago, at least a couple thousand years ago. So writing in his Mahabhashya, Patanjali writing in his Mahabhashya, he mentions these numbers there. At his time, these numbers of shakas existed. Again, shaka is not, it is not a school of philosophy, it is a group of people who preserved this wisdom, this knowledge. Rigveda has 21 shakas. Now there are only two shakas, Shalaka and Bhaskala. And Yajurveda had at one point 101 shakas. We only have 6 shakas: Shukla, Madhyandina, Krishna, Shukla Yajurveda, Krishna Yajurveda. Most of you know that, right? So those are actually shakas. That is how they preserved this knowledge. And Atharvana Veda had 9 shakas. Only two are preserved, 2 are available now or surviving now. Samaveda had 1000 shakas, and we only have 3 shakas. Now, this slide shows you how knowledge is preserved over hundreds or thousands of years. And then this is also another example of how organization or systematization of knowledge happened. Vedas, you have Vedangas and Upavedas. These are not part of the Vedas, but these lie in the periphery of the Vedas. So you have Siksha, Vyakarana, Chandas, Nirukta, Jyotisha, and Kalpa, Shadanga, like 6 Vedanga. Shadangas are 6 Vedangas. And then you also have Upavedas, Yajurveda, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and Ardhashastra. So these are all Upavedas. So you see this kind of division to preserve and organize the knowledge. And then moving on to Shastras, we'll get to what Shastras and Darshanas are, but I wanted to show you how extensive the knowledge was preserved and propagated over many hundreds of years. You have Bhautika Shastra, which is natural science, Rasayana Shastra, Jiva Shastra, Vastu Shastra, Shilpa Shastra, Ardha, Niti, Nyaya Shastra, Natya Shastra, Moksha Shastra, Alankara Shastra, Dharma Shastra, and so on. So you see the division of knowledge and into different organized sections here. And now coming to what I started, we know every great civilization needs 2 aspects, right? One is reason, that is innovation, using the faculty. Innovation happens by reasoning, right? It doesn't happen because of faith in something. You have to reason out, you have to disrupt something. So reason is important. Earlier couple slides we saw preservation, right? Organization and preservation. Now I'm coming to reason. When we talk about Indian or Hindu religion, most of us think in terms of faith, right? Most of us think in terms of culture, faith or culture. Culture is different from civilization. Culture is customs. When we talk about Indian culture, things that come to our mind are festivals, dress, food, ways of handling things or ways of behaving, or pilgrimage places, going to temples. These are all the things that come to mind. This is the cultural aspect of it. within the broad civilization. This is the culture of it. Now this talk, the next few minutes, is going to be on, the entire talk actually is going to be on reason, how reason is so predominant. And in fact, most of what we think of culture or faith is actually based on reason and logic. When we think in terms of, when someone asks you, name some great philosophers that you know of, the names that come to our mind are usually Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Rene Descartes, John Locke, Hume, Immanuel Kant, etc., right? But how many of us know about or heard about Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Jaimini, Panini? So most of us have never heard these names. My idea behind giving these talks or writing books is to increase the awareness about our the Indian history, Indian philosophers, and what is the reason, what is logic, reason, dialectics, and everything that is embedded within the Indian philosophical systems. Now, coming to the main topic, what is a darshana? The word, the root word for darshana comes from the Sanskrit dhatu drish. Drish pashyati. Pashyati means to see, right? The word drish pashyati. See what? See the world view. Who am I? What is my relationship with the world? And what caused these two? Right? Jagat, Jiva, Jagat, and the third thing, known and the unknown. So that is, this is not religion. This is pure philosophy. And these are not opinions. These are based on a debate, reason, logic. It is, what is the difference between philosophical thinking and ordinary thinking? Right? Philosophical thinking has a structure to it. It follows certain rules. Ordinary thinking that we do every day, that we think hundreds of thousands of things every single day, right? So, but they don't have any organized, systematized logic. Sometimes, I mean, we do have some logic, but when we share it to others, when it becomes philosophy, then it has to follow certain rules. Then that is what is a darshana. And traditionally, they have identified 6 astika darshanas: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. If you notice, I'm saying them as couplets: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa is also called Mimamsa in short. Uttara Mimamsa is Vedanta. We'll get to that in a little bit, what these are. And all these, why are these 6 darshanas called astika darshanas? Because they accept the authority of the Vedas. And then there are some darshanas like Charvaka darshana, who are materialists. See, you see both materialists and you see the philosophers who accept the existence of an Ishvara. So you have all kinds of philosophers within the context, within the Indian subcontinent, and some of them accept the authority of the Vedas, some don't. It's okay if you don't, but these are the ones that accept the authority of the Vedas. You have Charvaka, Nyaya, Charvaka, Jaina, and Bauddha darshanas, who kind of deviated from accepting the authority of the Vedas, and they still come under the Sanatana Dharmic darshanas. And before going into what the Shad Darshanas are, I wanted to give you, see, the topic, today's topic is to how to approach Indian Darshanas to make sense of it, right? So there are 3 things we need to remember, one has to remember before actually going into understanding the Darshanas. Obviously, I'm not going to go over in great detail about each of these Darshanas, because that will be not just one talk, but a series of talks going on for weeks, if not months. So, what are the 3 things that you need to remember? First topic is the Anubandha Chatushtaya. What do you need to get into these darshanas? Anubandha Chatushtaya. Second is, how is this knowledge preserved? In what format is this knowledge preserved? Which is sutra format. And so we'll come to each of these. as we go along before we get into the actual darshana. The third thing that I want to talk about before we get into darshanas is pramanas. What are pramanas and what are they? Why are they important? Anubandha chatushtaya, anubandha chatushtaya. If you are a Sanskrit student, if you have any little understanding of Indian languages, you know chatushtaya means a section, a group of four. Anubandha, connection. Anubandham, right? Anubandha, connection. Chatushtaya, four, a group of four connections. What are these four connections? Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha, Prayojana. Adhikari. This is important for any subject, whatever that may be, not just darshanas. If I see, I'm a medical doctor, I want to get into medical school. When I wrote for to get into medical school, wrote exams and qualifying exams and so on, then I have to be eligible to get into the medical college or medical school, right? So what is my eligibility to get into that? I have to prove, I have to show them that I'm serious about what I'm going to get into. I want to use that knowledge for for a good purpose and not for the detriment of humanity, right? So these are all the eligibility criteria. They don't ask me where I'm from, what is my gender, what is my religion, what is my caste, or what is my ethnicity or race. The things that makes you eligible even to this darshana is, are you serious about it, are you going to complete it, and are you going to use it for the betterment of humanity. So this is eligibility. Then the next thing is the subject matter. What is the subject matter of the study? And then you have the purpose. What is the purpose of the subject you're going to study, and how are these three, one, two, three, linked or related? That is the sambandha. So adhikari, this is what we just talked about. What is the importance of it? And vishaya, subject matter. Prayojana, what is the purpose of it? And then sambandha. So anubandha chatushtaya covers the most important questions, like who is it, who is involved in it, what is the eligibility of the subject or the person, what is it about, why do you want to study, and how are these, how is it relevant. So that is anubandha chatushtaya. And you see, when I in my book here, in this Indian philosophy is rediscovered, in each of these darshana, the six darshanas, I start my chapter with the anubandha chatushtaya for each darshana. You can see this in a little bit more detail in my book here. And then the second aspect you want to know before you get into the darshanas, in fact any shastra, especially Indian shastras, is, in fact, you will see that this what I'm going to explain is the sutra format. The sutra format was also used by Greek philosophers, Pythagoras, Socrates, and them. They actually used sutra format, pithy, short statements. Sutra, Bhashya, Vartika, Vritti, Tika, and Tippani are different ways of expressing or expressing and preserving the knowledge. So, Sutra. All darshanas and most of the shastras are in the form of sutras. Sutras are short, pithy statements. They sometimes lack verb, sometimes lack even noun. Can you think of a sentence that lacks a verb? It doesn't make much sense, right? But sutras, some of them, adengunaha, vruddhiradaich, you see these Panini and Ashtadhyayi sutras, and in them you seldom find verbs, and therefore you need interpretation and expansion of these verbs, of these sutras. So in fact, sutra has a definition: alpaksharam asandigdham saravat vishwato mukham astobham anavadhyancha sutram sutra vido viduhu. Brevity is important. Brevity is extremely important, especially for the linguists. Ardhamatra laghavena putrotsavam manyante vayyakaranaha. There is a statement which means that for the linguist, vayyakaranas, the brevity is so important that just by condensing a word into half, ardhamatra, by condensing ardhamatra laghavena, putrotsavam manyante vayyakaranaha. They are so happy as if they just had a child. and that too a male child, because it was written by them. Male or female doesn't matter. Child is a great asset, because the child continues our progeny, our lineage. And so the Vaiyakaranas feel so happy just by condensing half matra, not the word, half matra. Ardhamatra laghavena putro. So now alpaksharam, asandigdham, clarity, lack of ambiguity, rich content, universality, relevance, reliability, flawlessness. All these are characteristics of the sutra. So sutras are pithy statements that lack verb, sometimes even a subject. So we talked about Paninian sutras. There are 4,000 of them. If you're part of MA Sanskrit, if you're an MA Sanskrit student, you'll be exposed to these. This is extraordinary what Panini did. I spoke with one of the greatest surviving linguists, Noam Chomsky, some time ago, and his students as well. And one of his students, the podcast is actually on the YouTube, that the one I did. One of his students actually said that there are students who are doing PhD in one of the sutras of Panini, one of the 4,000 sutras, and people are doing PhDs on these sutras. So these sutras are so extraordinary what Panini has done, and we don't, unfortunately, we don't even know his name, most of us. And then to explain the sutras, numerous forms of expansions and explanations have come into place. They are called bhashya, vritti, vartika, tika, tippani. You have yoga sutras, and then for the sutras there is bhashya, and for that bhashya there is vritti, and then things that are missed in the vritti, there are vartika. There is tika and tippani, which is essentially notes. Tippani and tika, or the notes that we write in the class, right? So that kind of notes, easy to understand. Now the third aspect, before going into the darshanas or pramanas, we have seen anubandha chatushtaya, we have seen sutra format, and now coming to pramanas. We'll come to pramanas in a little bit more detail later, but I want to introduce this before we get into it. So you are seeing this screen that I'm talking to, you are listening to me with your ears, and you're using your faculty of intellect to make sense of it. These are all the tools that are using to understand this knowledge, right? So these are the pramanas. Pratyaksha, so the eyes, the ears, and the faculty of mind that you're using, these are pratyaksha pramana. And you are drawing conclusions out of it based on your present, what I'm saying, and you are linking that to your past knowledge or the knowledge you heard somewhere or read somewhere. Anumana, upamana, comparison, ardhapatti, by inferring. So the example they gave is, I see there is a man here who is obese, who is um, um, who is obese, who is overweight. He's not eating during the daytime, but then how can he be overweight? Because he's eating at night. So in other words, inferring based on circumstance, that is ardhapatti. Anupalabdhi is very interesting. Knowledge through absence of things. Knowing that there is no pot in front of me because I don't see one. This sounds very trivial, right? But then this anupalabdhi can be used in Vedanta Shastra and metaphysics in very abstract concepts. In not because you don't see something doesn't mean there is absence of it. You see, you'll get to that as you go and use this pramana in certain Vedanta Shastras. And then, of course, the final one is Shabda Pramana. Shabda Pramana, either expert opinion or Guru's words, Vedas, Shastras, and so on. So that is Shabda. So Pramana is the means of right knowledge. Pratyaksha, Anuman, Upamana, Ardhapattam, Anupalabdhi, Shabda Pramanas. Now, with this knowledge, you enter into the darshanas. Most of us, when we study the darshanas, or when we were introduced to darshanas in either the MA course here or any other course, you just jump in. It becomes difficult to make sense of it, but eventually you'll start making sense of it. But if you have certain foundational principles, things would become a lot more easier. So we talked about Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, right? Each of these, like I said, it becomes an elaborate talk, and I'm not a scholar in any of these darshanas. I've gone through MA Sanskrit, in which we were introduced and explained what these darshanas are. Then I did my own study scholarship and I made sense of it, wrote a book on it, and now I'm giving you some tips to understand, approach how to understand these darshanas. Nyaya. Remember, when you are entering into this Nyaya Darshana or any Darshana, Anubandha Chatushtaya, and then what is the in Anubandha Chatushtaya, you will see Prayojana, Sambandha, Vishaya. What is the Vishaya here? Nyaya is primarily focused on logic and epistemology. Nyaya, the word Nyaya itself comes from the root word or the dhatu ni, which means Nayati. That is why Netra, the eye is called Netra, which comes from the root word ni Nayati, that which takes us forward, that which makes us see things. So ni Nayati, that takes us forward. Nyaya is one that will make us understand any philosophy using logic and epistemology. Epistemology is nothing but Pramana Shastra, the one that I just mentioned in the earlier slide. This is Pramanas, right? So means of attaining the right knowledge, that is epistemology. In English, it is epistemology. And then logic is a set of rules to reason out something. Systematized, this Nyaya philosophy or Nyaya Darshana was systematized by Akshapada Gautama. This is not Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism. This is Akshapada Gautama. Now you will see everybody stops at 6th century BCE in Indian philosophical systems. When I come to the topic, I'll explain why it is the case, because these translations were written by the Europeans. So they don't want to say anything, go anything before 6th century BCE. I mean, no offense to any Europeans listening to this talk here, because you are not part of that cohort of the Europeans. You belong to a different age, different thinking cohort of the Europeans. They came with a certain agenda, and now coming back to this, so 6th century BC, they did not want to assign any historical dates before 6th century, because the Greek philosophers started off, Pythagoras, Socrates, they all started off from 6th century, so they wanted to stop there. So that is why you usually don't see anyone going before or past 6th century BCE, back in time. So systematized by Akshapada Gautama. And now this philosophy emphasizes reasoning and debate. It is based on, we talked about sutras, right, earlier in the earlier slide. So this Nyaya philosophies, or Darshana, is based on the Nyaya sutras. They are 528, roughly 528 sutras. They cover reason, logic, epistemology, dialectics, and metaphysics. You immediately see that way before the medieval period, way before the millennia, the rise of Christianity, you see there is so much wisdom, so much knowledge happening in those circles in the Indian subcontinent. Nyaya adheres to strict reason without dwelling into the Vedic ritualism. So the Nyaya's sole area of interest or primary focus is different from, say, Purva Mimamsa. So this is different. So we should not pit one darshana against the other, because their primary focus is different, their goals are different. And when we look at the goals of each philosophy, each darshana has its own goal. And the goal of one darshana should not be in opposition to the other darshana, because the goals are different, You cannot compare one darshana to the other. They feed on each other, but you should not pit one against each other. So the goal is to remove ignorance. Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. That vidya that liberates us from ignorance is the right vidya, right knowledge, right? So Nyaya removes our ignorance through logic and through logical inquiry into what? Into the ontology, into the nature, into the reality, into the real world. It is not concerned about the Vedantic concepts of Brahman or Atma and so on. Nyaya is concerned about the phenomenal, the transactional world. So when we come to, again, this is another thing that I found very useful, and which makes a lot of sense when you're actually approaching these darshanas. You must understand three words: pramana, prameya, pramata. Not just this darshana, any darshana, including Vedanta. Pramana, we talked about pramana, which is the epistemology. Prameya in English is ontology. Prameya is the object of your knowledge. What is that material that you are trying to understand or study? If I'm a neuroscientist, I'm studying the morpho or the structure and function of the brain, right? Structure and the function of the brain. In the brain, I just can't study the entire brain. I have to categorize it into different functional and morphological categories. That is the organization of the object that you are studying. It can be physical object, it can be non-physical object. For example, if you're studying the mind, then that is the prameya. That is, if you're studying the mind, that is the prameya of your study. That is the ontology. How do you categorize mind? In Indian darshana or shastras, we have categorized mind as mano, buddhi, ahankara and chittam. Manas, buddhi, ahankara and chittam. That is the ontology of studying the mind. So that is pramana, prameya and pramata. What the current phase we are in the human civilization, in the arc of human history, pramata has become less and less important. The human agent is being replaced by a non-human agent, the artificial intelligence we talk about. But the Indian Shastras have given equal importance to the pramata, the knower, because the person who is actually studying comes with his or her own characteristics and their own biases, agendas, fears, and their own. They come with a baggage. You just cannot replace one. You can't say one pramata is same as the other. You can't say you as an agent of study is same as a different agent. That is why even in the future, doctors are easily replaceable because the pramata is given less and less important. The agent who is doing, so for example, in the field of medicine that I am in, pramana, the tools that I use to understand something, direct perception of the patient using lab tests, biochemical tests, and then I'm using various other techniques, imaging, MRIs, CAT scans, and so on and so forth. I'm using all these pramanas to arrive at a certain knowledge. Somebody comes to me with a headache. I want to know what is the cause of the severe headache. Is it because there is a tumor? Is it because there is a bleed in the brain? Or is it because of a vasodilation which causes migraine? And so I want to know all these things. I want to use the pramanas. And the prameya is the brain itself, the categorization of the brain. I need to know the anatomy and the function of the brain to understand it. But what is the pramata? What is the importance of pramata here? The pramata is being given less and less importance in the current paradigm of science. But in the darshana, in the Indian knowledge systems, the pramata is equally important. And I'll tell you, I want to belabor on this topic a little bit, because the pramata, if he's being funded by, let us say I'm the pramata doing a neuroscientific study and I'm being funded by a pharmaceutical company, and if my results come against the company and I cannot publish them out, right? But if they come in favor of the drug, in support of the drug, then immediately I'll get a publication. So you see the pramata becomes important equally here. So Nyaya uses four, there are numerous pramanas. We saw several pramanas in the, where is that? Yeah, here. We have seen numerous pramanas, right? In this, out of all this list of pramanas, each darshana picks a certain pramanas that are applicable to it. So Nyaya accepts or uses four pramanas: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda. And I'm not going to go deep into why this is the case, because that is what matters to Nyayikas. And Prameya. Prameya is the object of that knowledge. And what is the object of this knowledge? To understand the world, the functioning of the world, and their relationships. So categorizes, Prameya, remember, categorization is part of ontology. And Nyaya studies substances or from different categories. So these categories that the Nyaya studies, or the subject matter of the Nyaya, are Dravya, Guna, Karma, Samanya, Vishesha, Samavaya, Bhava. So this is one long sentence, that's how they remember it. Dravya, Guna, Karma, Samanya, Vishesha, Samavaya, Abhava. That is the Prameya, that is the ontology of it. Now, what is the Pramata? The subject or the agent who acquires this knowledge about the Prameya, about these categories, using the four Pramanas. So that is how you start off entering into the Nyaya philosophy. And then what are the prominent philosophers of Nyaya Darshana? So I'm not going to go over a whole lot details, a lot of details into the Nyaya philosophy. And you got the basic idea here. Here is what is important here. Important about the historicity. Prominent philosophers of Nyaya Darshana, unless you understand what came before what we are studying right now, you can't appreciate. We must have an awareness of the past. As Professor Wang Gunggu, who is a great, is 95-year-old, still living, a great Asian philosopher, Chinese Asian philosopher, he always says it's important for you to understand your past, whatever subject matter that you are studying, whether it is technology, medicine, sociology, politics, whatever that is. It is important that you understand your history, what came before it, and how that history influences the present, and it also influences the future of it. So Akshapada Gautama, we saw him, and then we have Vatsayana, Udyotakara, Vachaspati Mishra, Jayanta Bhatta, Udayana, Sriharsha, Gangesh Upadhyaya, Shankar Mishra, Raghunatha Shiromani. You see, 16th century, up until 16th century, there was great developments happening in the Nyaya Darshana, and after that, we start seeing the slow death of this darshana, and for numerous reasons. One is destruction of conversions, proselytization, which is conversion, and colonizations, destruction of the temples or destruction of the libraries. So many things, so many reasons, which I've elaborated in my book here. And I want to say something here about the Nyaya Darshana before I go into Vaisheshika. These Nayayikas are very interesting people. Of all the darshanas I studied in my MA Sanskrit, MA course, I found Nyaya to be sort of complicated than the other darshanas, partly because I'm a little bit more familiar with Vedanta, Purva Mimamsa, yoga, a little bit about Samkhya Darshana, but Nyaya Vaisheshika was very new to me. The reason why it was complicated is because they use very highly specialized terminology. Nyaya language itself is highly specialized Sanskrit. In this slide, actually in my book also, I mentioned the English version of it. Instead of saying there are no birds on the tree, Nyaya says the tree is the locus of the absence of all birds. So they have a peculiar way of explaining things. But to an untrained mind, whatever is said in Nyaya, most of what is said in Nyaya sounds like a linguistic combat. only a Nyayika, only a scholar of Nyaya could make a sense of a lot of things. And that is one of the reasons why it, and also because of the Sanskrit, and also within Sanskrit, a specialized form of Sanskrit, it became difficult to translate it into other languages. And now Nyaya, we have saw what Nyaya is. Now coming to Vaisheshika, remember Anubandha Chatushtaya, remember Pramanas, remember Shastras. Primary focus is Anu Siddhanta. Anu is crudely translated as atom. Atom, the word atom comes from a Tomos. Tomos, you heard about CT scans, right? Computerized tomography. CT is the term CT, abbreviation of computerized tomography. Tomos means indivisible part, the tiniest part. You cut something so, you slice something so uh, um, tiny that it becomes the most indivisible part of it. That is how the computerized tomogram or tomography came into being. It slices the human, it takes pictures in such fine slices and then puts them together and then gives us a picture of a CAT scan of whatever body part you are looking at. So that is the tomos, and then atomos is the tiniest part of it, and that is the atom. Anu is the same concept. The tiniest indivisible part of matter is Anu. Vaisheshika says that everything started as Anu, as the tiniest particle, and before the particle existed, but it existed as an avyakta form, and then because of a certain disturbance within the cosmos, and then the avyakta became vyakta. Unmanifest became the manifest, and then everything started as anus, which is the tiniest particle, and then dvi anu, three anu, by formation that divides into 2, 3, 4 and numerous parts, and then becomes the world that we see. This is the Anu Siddhanta or the ontology. This type of ontology that Vaisheshika talks about was systematized by Kanada. And of course, nowadays we say that atomism was proposed first by Democritus, the Greek philosopher, but long before Democritus, Kanada was the one who he was not the one who invented it, he was the one who systematized it, which means that it was already there, but then he put it in the form of a siddhanta, he put it in the form of sutras, and then from there on the lineage continued. And Vaisheshika explains reality, the phenomenal world that we see, through categories, through padartha Nyaya. Nyaya Vaisheshika, they combined together and became Tarka Shastra, and then closely aligned with the Nyaya. So now remember Pramana, Prameya, Pramata for every Darshana. Now Pramana, Vaisheshika uses mainly one Pramana, but it adopted the Anumana as a second Pramana. It uses Pratyaksha Pramana. See, when you are looking at atoms, you cannot imagine things, right? You have to actually see it in whatever means that is necessary. So direct perception and inference are the two ways of understanding this or getting to this knowledge, and that is the pramanas. These two pramanas the Vaisheshika follow, and prameya, just like Nyaya, Vaisheshika also deals with the seven padarthas: dravya, guna, karma, samanya, vishesha, samavaya, abhava. So these are the seven padarthas that Vaisheshika talks about. See, Vaisheshika is not interested in Parabrahman, Atman, and the relationship between these two. It is, although they do mention that because that is part of the greater scheme of knowledge, can't omit it, but their primary focus is on these categories. Now we have the pramata. What is the conscious self? That is the agent who is observing it. The agent engages through the mind and the sense organ, that is the manas and indriyas, to make sense of it, to arrive at conclusions. And now, who are the prominent philosophers? Remember, we need history, we need an awareness of the history. Kanada, Prashastapada, Vyoma Shiva, Sridhara, Udayana, Bhasavarjana, Annam Bhatta. The one that most people follow to study Nyaya Vaisheshika now is Tarka Sangraha. It was written in the 18th century or 17th century by Annam Bhatta, which is Tarka Sangraha. I mean, that is what we were also introduced in our MA course. Now coming to, we have seen Nyaya Vaisheshika. Then coming to Samkhya. Samkhya, the primary focus again is on the material world, and of course there is um, there is the metaphysics involved in it, but the primary subject matter is ontology. You cannot say they only talk about epistemology or ontology and omit ethics and metaphysics. No, they cannot. It is the grand scheme of things, but in it the primary focus is ontology. It was systematized by Kapila. It most people, the translators, call it as a dualistic system. I don't like the word dualistic because it conjures different ideas as non-dual and dual, but this is a different concept. Dualistic system where they talk about Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is the, see, you have a bulb, right, light bulb, and then there is the electricity that comes into the bulb. If Prakriti is the bulb, Purusha is the electricity, the consciousness that animates, that enlivens the matter. So that is why matter is called Jada Prakriti. The full name of the Prakriti is Jada Prakriti. Jada means inanimate. Purusha is Chaitanya Purusha, the one who animates it, the one who enlivens it. You remove the consciousness out of the Prakriti, it becomes a corpse, it becomes a dead body. So Sankhya enumerates, that is why Sankhya, see, Sankhya, the words sound similar, right? So it outlines 25 tattvas, Panchavimshati tattvas, or if we take away Purusha out of it, you get Chaturvimshati tattvani. So the goal is to remember, Savidyaya Vimuktaye, all knowledge should liberate us from what? From ignorance. So liberation means what? Well, I mean, that's a whole different concept, but liberation through discrimination between Purusha and Prakriti. Now we have Pramana, Prameya, Pramata. What are the pramanas of Sankhya Darshana? Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda Pramana. These are the three things: direct perception, inference, and scriptural or authoritative or expert opinion or trustworthy source. So these are the three things that Sankhya accepts. And then Prameya. Prameya, we just talked about. What are the things that Sankhya is interested in? It is interested in the 25 tattvas, or the principles of reality. Purusha, Prakriti, Mahat, Buddhi, Ahankara, Manas, Pancha Gnanendriya, Pancha Karmendriyadi, Pancha Tanmatras, and 5 Mahabhutas. So again, here the self is the true knower, the one who is the pramata, the one, the conscious principle within us, that is the pramata. Now here is the this is actually part of my book also, Sankhya scheme of Prakriti, Purusha, and the Panchavimshati Tattvani. You have on the left side, to your left, you see the Purusha, which is the conscious principle. And then you have the entire the right side of the screen here, Prakriti, Mahat, Buddhi, Ahankara, Manas, Panchatanmatra, Panchabhutas, Panchagnanendriyani, Panchakarmendriyani. So you have all this whole scheme of things, which I'm not going to go into great detail because that will be a whole long lecture. And now remember the history here. Again, Sankhya Darshana, Kapila, who was the one who put it all together. Panchashika, Ishvara Krishna. Ishvara Krishna authored the Sankhya Karikas, which are the most important text of the Sankhya Darshanas. We don't have Kapila Sutra, Sankhya Sutras. What we have is Ishvara Krishna, Sankhya Karikas. I actually read those. Vachaspati Mishra, Aniruddha, Vijnana Bhikshu. These are the names these are the philosophers who are prominent philosophers of Sankhya Darshana. Again, you see 16th to 17th century it stops. Almost all of these except Vedanta. And now moving on to yoga. We saw Sankhya, and now coming to yoga. Yoga primary focus is on the mental, physical, and ethical disciplines. What is the goal of all this? Through the self, again, liberation. Liberation of what? Liberation of ignorance from liberation from ignorance. The self disengages from identification with the mind and matter and recognizes its true nature, which is the conscious principle. That is the goal. And this was systematized by Patanjali. Even before Patanjali, there were Yoga Sutras, but he was the one who kind of made it popular through his eightfold path called Ashtanga Yoga. So it shares metaphysics with Samkhya Darshana. Now you have Pramana, Prameya, Pramata. Like Samkhya, Yoga also accepts three Pramanas, tools of attaining knowledge: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, or Shabda. Agama or Shabda are reliable sources or scriptural or Vedic authority. Prameya, now we see that
Uh, Rajivji? Okay, it looks like there might be some technical issue. What an amazing presentation. I've heard these ideas and subjects and even had different webinars on it, but Rajivji has really weaved them together very well. Let's see if we can get him back on. Um, and so he's put this all together in his book, and it looks like he's taken a lot of his book and turned it into this presentation for us on this webinar. So let me see if I can get Rajuji back on. Let me just, in the meantime, I had a couple polls up. I can share a little bit of what our audience looks like. I did message him, Rajuji, back. Yeah, so I can put his recent book in the chat. It is Indian Philosophies Rediscovered, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Relevance. There it is, and that is in the chat. Yeah, so at Hindu University of America, we're really glad to have folks like Dr. Rajiv put in time and effort. I don't know if he will share his slides with everyone. This webinar will be made available afterwards, Sachinji, but I think the book covers all of this and is in there. But let me just share these results real quick. So for the 4 or 5 of you on your first time, sorry for a little extra technical difficulty. 10 regulars, 8 of you have attended before. Glad that you're with us for today's webinar. Tomorrow's webinar, we're going to have other HOA students report back from the World Sanskrit Conference. So they went to Nepal, they did the presentations, they gave presentations on Sanskrit in Nepal at the World Sanskrit Conference. We're going to have that webinar tomorrow. And you can see also here in this poll, we've got people who have taken the courses at HUA, 5 of you enrolled in programs like Dr. Rajiv. Some of you are considering, please do enroll in a course at HUA. This next quarter is going to start in October. You have plenty of time to find that. Let me just launch another quick poll. Just let us know if you're interested in the orientation to Hindu Studies course. If some of this stuff is over your head, this is a good place to start. Kalyanji, the president of HUA, actually teaches this orientation to Hindu Studies course. So let us know if you're interested in that, or if you're interested in a certificate program or a degree program where maybe at the end of it, you too could write your own book on a particular area of study that you are interested in. Let's see, if Rajivji is not coming back, that would not be great. Maybe he has internet or technical issues. Give me one. In the meantime, please put in the chat where you're zooming in from. I can give you a chat shout out if you have a specific question or something else like you like to share. We are nearing the top of the hour, so I'm he barely got through half of his presentation, I think. He's gonna get through all of the darshanas, right? Um, Kiana from Florida, thank you for joining. I hope Rajivji is okay. He's ran into technical difficulties. Maybe we'll do it as a part two then. We are at the top of the hour. He's not rejoining. I know he still has a lot to present. Rajivji, have you joined us? The audience can still hear me, right? So I'm here. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. Who's making that suggestion? Apurvaji. We'll do a part two with Dr. Rajiv. I know I want to hear the rest of this because again, he's given such a great overview of these important darshanas, and he's gonna, I think, go through all of Hinduism, all of what we know is Hinduism. So we'll do this as a part two. Um, Let me know in the poll right here if you're interested in taking a course at HUA, if in a program. We'll definitely do a part two, everyone. We'll get some more people on board, attendance-wise. You'll all be notified. Yeah, he's just not connected, so he probably just got frozen on his share screen. Yeah, we'll do a part two with Rajivji. I think he'll be okay with that. We'll reschedule in about a month or so. Um, and thank you everyone for joining. If you have any questions, now's the time. You can put in the chat if you want to raise your hand. Who said something? The retired IT professional made a comment. Very erudite, scholarly presentation. I would like to get in touch with you. I'm studying different aspects of it, and he liked the presentation as well. Yep. Um, yeah. All right, everyone. That is Vijayji. Thank you for your question. We'll share that with him offline and maybe as a part of our next webinar with Dr. Rajiv Kurapati, HOA graduate, multiple author. I dropped his book in the chat. Please do take a look at that. And yeah, what are darshanas? Yeah, we're gonna have to get into all of it again, Anuji. That is an important question. What are the darshanas? We are getting into that. I can see Rajivji is actually moving slides, but we still can't hear him. All right. All right, folks. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We will cut it short. We'll call this part one. And then right here, here's the six darshanas and the focus. Rajivji, we can't hear you still. I don't know if he's still giving the presentation. So not in the chat. All right. A lot of you are still sticking with us. Just give me another second and figure it out. Um, Yeah, we'll see what parts of the presentation we can share. We often put parts of the webinar out as reels on YouTube and Instagram, so you can catch some of the highlights that way as well. Okay. G. All right, we're gonna have to think your audio got disconnected. Camera's off. Yeah, if the book was available in Barnes and Noble, that'd be nice. I think Amazon, I looked for it in a couple of different places. When we have Rajiv G back, maybe he can let us know which publisher he went through and some of that. That's an interesting conversation. Uh, how to get a book published. Yes. Yes, Christina, thank you for joining, and we'll see how we can do it. All right, folks, I am sorry about the technical difficulties, but we'll end it here today, part one. G2G, yes, you already bought the book on Amazon. Great. Any other questions before we close it out? Yeah, yep. Definitely needs two parts because of the volume and the material. We'll have a part two with Dr. Rajiv Kurapati in the future in about a month or so. Please join us for that. And in the meantime, take a course at HOA, join us for the next webinar, peruse the website, check out our YouTube. We have a lot of content in our blogs. If you'd like to write for our blogs, if you'd like to propose webinars, again, HOA is our platform. Happy to make this build this with you in whatever way you want to contribute. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all. I'm Okur Patel, Director of Outreach for Hindi University of America, signing off for today. Namaste. Dhanyavad.